So let's get started. Welcome, everyone. You're all my usuals except for Kim and Eddie. I'm going to call you guys out this time. You were not part of the first two, but you are part of my regular tasters, so I don't need to introduce myself. But I will go ahead and introduce Allison and Mike, who are my partners in crime for these awesome tasting series that we've been putting together. Mike is in charge of a really cool 30 to 60 second wine tasting series. He does little videos of wine from all over the world, and he partners with a handful of his friends as well as Allison, which is how I met Allison, through Mike. And Allison is a beast of her own. She is a wine writer and is in a number of different publications. She owns a podcast that's relatively new. And Allison, remind me of the name of the podcast. I was just looking on a post about it.
So I host a podcast called Wine Soundtrack. I'm the US host. It originated in Italy in 2017, and we interview winemakers and get to know them in 30 questions, which are, some are about them as winemakers, some about them as wine drinkers, some as human beings. It's kind of funny. Some are serious, some are thought-provoking. It's silly. And then I do videos with two girlfriends, other wine writers in Chicago and Canada, called Crush on This. And each week we talk about a different wine or region or something. So those are the two. And then Wine Weirdos. And
thank God.
And I'd also like to call out,
all go to Twitter or Instagram. No, it's not on Instagram. If you go to Twitter or YouTube and look at the Wine Weirdo video today that went up, it's about this little Pinot Noir in Santa Barbara called Pioneer.
Oh, you did it! Yay! I haven't been on social media today. I'm so excited to watch it. Okay, yay. So that's homework for me and everyone else. Just to clue anyone in who doesn't know what we're all excited about. Aaron, my husband, who's eating, down there, he's down on my screen, so I'm pointing down. We bottled a beautiful Pinot Noir made by a fantastic female winemaker named Kat Neenan from the Spear Vineyard, which is organically and biodynamically farmed. And I'm so excited. I didn't know when it was going to come up, but Allison and Mike apparently just posted a review of it, so we'll all have to watch it.
Yeah, we hated it. We did. It was really weird, but we couldn't lie. So,
you know, you got to be honest. It's important.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So welcome to Austria, everyone. I am so excited. I personally have actually worked with Austrian wine producers before in the San Ynez Valley. It's a small company named Soul Miner. Definitely recommend reaching out to them or tasting. If you are ever up in that area, you're always welcome to reach out to me and I will send you their way. But it's really rare to find Austrian wine producers in the US. So I feel really lucky to have worked with them and learned a lot about the different farming techniques. If anyone is aware of biodynamic farming, that's actually where it started. So it's kind of the birthplace. We can talk a little bit about that in a little bit, but these are some of my favorite wines, and I'm so excited you all get to taste them. I'm just curious, by show of hands, who has had a Gruner Veltliner before? Most of you, half of you. And who has had a Blaufränkisch before? Just about the same amount. Awesome.
And of the Gruner, I'm curious, was it an Austrian one or was it domestic, since we have a lot of producers who are starting to grow it?
Both.
Both?
Yeah, we used to be members at Soul Miner, which is how we met Gina. Yeah. And we love it. We loved their wine, but so that got us into.
Hi,
that got us.
She can host it.
Yeah, I actually, that's where I met Ryan and Melanie, and they had Rory Rory was like 2 months old or something like that. It was so adorable. She was just like the easiest little baby in a tasting room, and she still is. And she just turned 3. I can't believe it's been that long. But yeah, so I'm really excited for those of you who haven't had a Gruner or a Blaufränkisch. I truly believe that these will be your next 2 favorite wines. And these wine styles are getting more popular, so you can start to find some domestic producers, especially Gruner, because it grows pretty easily, especially in California, in the cooler regions, in the same regions that grow Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. Yeah. And actually, the vineyard that we purchased, the barrel of wine that we bottled, also has like a single acre of Gruner. So, and that's the Spear Vineyard. So if you can seek out their Gruner, it's fantastic, and it has a screamingly high acid content, which I adore. But without further ado, Allison, will you tell us a little bit about Austria?
Yeah. So, and I would encourage you, if you can mute, but feel free to jump off of mute if you have questions, because I'm gonna overload you with information. Ready? Okay. So Austria is an old world wine region. I mean, it is something with a lot of traditions. We know it, but Austria is like considered a modern wine country right now because of the quality. It's obviously Austrians and Germans are all about modernity. So, I mean, that's playing a large part in the wines, but Austrian wines are prized by wine experts and wine lovers all over the world. They fit into a category of great quality wines for value prices. And you definitely get kind of a bang for your buck with these wines, which I think you'll find even in the wines we have today, you get a real bang for your buck. These are wines that sommeliers have known about for a while. And if you really think about back in the day when you used to go to restaurants, there were Austrian wines on almost every top wine list in the country. And what's great about them is Austrian wines have a lot of body and they're very climate driven, but they're very fresh. And that freshness makes it really great to pair with food. And so when you're thinking about, I mean, I love it that I know that David and Deborah have gone theme wines each time we've done this. And of course, schnitzel and other Austrian dishes are going to be great with the wines. But, you know, Donnie, they were eating leftover Italian, great. Chinese food, any sort of Asian cuisines, Mediterranean cuisines. Austrian wines are so versatile. They'll go with anything and everything. So a wide range from schnitzel to sushi. So you can have fun. So Austria is actually a really small region and it's a landlocked country. If you want to share the map that I had sent you, Gina?
Yes.
Just to give a quick sense. Austria is at the same latitude as Burgundy, but it's more centrally located in Europe. So when you look at this map and you see where Austria is located, you'll see that they're getting influence from, they're sort of considered a transitional zone. They get, pardon me?
Doesn't everyone see the map?
I do.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. So if you can see there, you have a mild and damp climate, Atlantic climate coming in from the west, and you have the continental, the Pannonian they call it, zone, which has a broader variety in temperatures coming from the east. You have cool air coming from the north, up there, number 3, and then from the south, you have the Mediterranean climate coming up. And so this mixture, you get kind of warm, sunny summer and autumn days, you get northernly cool nights, and this is what brings out these aromatic wines that have a lot of body, they have a lot of character, and a lot of freshness and acidity. And so there really isn't anywhere else on earth that wines can be so concentrated and fresh at the same time. And I hope you're going to see that today. So you can go back if you can leave it up if you want, Gina, or you can take it away. So the grape growing area in Austria totals about 113,000 acres. And most of that happens on the eastern part of Austria. So it's near Hungary, it's near Slovenia, and it's near the Czech Republic. And there are 23,000 wine growers. And what that means is it's a lot of small producers, small production, family owned, tiny little things. And that will also play a part, which I have a hard time kind of rationalizing this. You're not going to get cheap wine from Austria. You're not going to get, you know, $5 or $8 wines, but at the same time, you get great values because the wines we have today are in the kind of $15 to $20 range. So you are getting a lot of value for your money, but you're not going to get kind of like grocery store cheap brands because these are all family owned. So even though it's a small producing region, it has a broad diversity of grapes, interesting wines, and lots of different things. So you think of Austrian wine, you probably think of white wine. I mean, that's what I did. Gruner Veltliner is a perfect example. Riesling is also something they produce a lot of. But in the 1980s, red wine started to come back. It was not something that people were making a lot of prior to that, but they increased the quality of it. And in the 80s and 90s, putting quality into red grapes. Today, they've focused on a lot of indigenous varieties as well as international varieties. And today, red wines make up about a third of the production of Austrian wine, which has doubled over the years. But still today, there are 63% of the grapes are planted to white varieties. Now about grapes, we're not going to go into all the myriad of grapes that Austria has planted, but they have close to 40 different grapes planted that are authorized. Now, there are international grapes, so Riesling, which is not originally from Austria, it's from Germany. Sauvignon Blanc, they have Pinot Blanc that we spoke about 2 weeks ago with the Weissburgunder. They have Chardonnay, they have Pinot Noir, they have Merlot, they have Cab, they have all those international varieties. But what is really cool is how popular Gruner Veltliner has gotten over the last couple of years. And then also with the red grapes, when you have Zweigelt, Blaufränkisch, and then a number of others that I can't even begin to pronounce. So I'm not going to try. Another really interesting factor about Austrian wine is that they are one of the leading, they are the world leader, actually, let me clarify that, in organic farming. So about 23% of the agricultural area and 15% of the vineyards are managed according to organic farm, really high percent, 23,000 different wine growers in the area. And they have different certifications. And still to this day, the majority of grapes are harvested by hand. So again, even though we have 113,000 acres, which is not a lot compared to bigger countries, but a fair amount, you're still talking about small quality production, family-owned businesses. And family farms really dominate the scene. You don't have cooperatives like the way you do in Italy or Spain. You don't really have large conglomerates. You really have really interesting small brands. So regions in Austria, as I said, most of the grapes are planted on the eastern side. That's where the more favorable conditions are. You will find it all over Austria as well, even near Vienna. They plant grapes, even near the city. But there are three main growing regions in Austria. There's the, Lower Austria, and I am going to go for this name. It's the Niederösterreich area, which runs along the Steiermark or Styria, as we call it, which is in the south. And then there's Burgenland in the east. And then there are 16 other regions, like I said, including Vienna, that are throughout Austria, but those are really the three primary regions. So we are going to get started with the first one I mentioned. I'm going to go easy on myself and call it Lower Austria, because Niederösterreich is really hard to say. But this is the actual the largest wine growing region for quality wine, or what they call Qualitätswein, in Austria. And there are 8 regions within this Lower Austria. So one of them is the Kamptal, which is where we're going to visit today with our Gruner Veltliner. And Kamptal is named for the river Kamp that runs through it. It's actually one of the offshoots of the Danube. Mike, jump in there. Go ahead, correct me. You're muted.
The Danube, right? The Danube.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I speak
I
Italian.
think.
Got me in a weird country now. But it's the river flows south, north to south into the Danube, and it's about 150 kilometers long. And there are close to 4,000 hectares under vine. And the Comtal is a very famous region. So if you're out in the market, this is probably a region that you will see on a lot of labels. And it is a region that when you see Comtal DAC, and again, this is going back to DAC is the same thing as AOC in France and DO in Italy and Spain, the qualitating body that says it's a qualifier by the government. Comtal is really known for Gruner Veltliner and Riesling. These are the two primary grapes, and they tend to make it in a classic middle weight, middle body kind of style. You get a diversity of rock formations, gravel, loess, different soils that will have this, and this diversity of soil that happens in the Comtal is what contributes to the beauty of these wines. What are other things I can tell you? With the climate, you've got elevation, you've got exposition, yeah, all the typical things that you need in a wine region. And to what I had said at the very beginning, where you have this transitional area with the impact of 4 climates, it really is that kind of hot weather meeting the cold weather that results in a diurnal shift that really affects the growing of the grapes in this area. So we're gonna jump into Gruner Veltliner. And Gruner Veltliner in Austria is 31% of vineyard plantings in all of Austria. And it is the most significant white wine grape. And it had started to decrease in the early 2000s in Austria, but it still is the dominant position in vineyards. And it comes from a crossing from Traminer. You've heard of Gewürztraminer, so Traminer. Nobody knows what the second grape is, what its other parent is. So
I would beg to differ. I did some research. At least the internet told me it's Traminer and Saint Gorgon, and that is not pronounced correctly.
Yes, it's from, in Burgenland, it is a thought, but it has not been 100% confirmed.
Okay. Thank you.
But yes, that is who they think that the other parent is with the Traminer. But if you've heard of other Veltliner grapes, which this is only if you're drinking Eastern European wine, is not related to other Veltliners like Roter Veltliner or Führer, like very old indigenous grapes that are in Germany and Austria and probably in Slovakia and Czech Republic, not related to any of the others. So Gruner Veltliner is a mid-season ripening grape. It's a really prolific grape. It requires a lot of yield regulation, and it grows in, it doesn't really like dryness. It tends to be very sensitive. So, you know, we always love our sensitive grapes because they always make such great wines. And it is susceptible to viruses, so you have to be careful. But Gruner, I mean, if you've tasted Gruner and you've only had 1 or 2, you might think of it as one style. Like it could be a very kind of light, high acid wine. I know a lot of the ones I've tried from the Santa Barbara region have been that kind of very high acid, bright wines that are really enjoyable. But you're also going to get everything from like a really ripe wine. You can get a medium body, you can get high body, you can get spicy, peppery notes, you can get stone fruit notes. And ultimately, this is a great wine to pair with Chinese food and other Asian dishes. And some people will say Gruner is really good to go with asparagus, which is the hardest food to pair with in the world.
And artichoke.
And artichoke. So there you go. I'm going to jump over so you can talk about the producer, Gina.
Awesome. So now that you all have had a chance to sip on this wine a little bit and start experiencing it, I will officially introduce it. This is the 2019 Steinschaden Gruner Veltliner, and it's owned by Karen and Erwin Steinschaden. It has been farmed sustainably within their family for the past 5 generations, which like I keep saying, as a California wine professional, the multi-generation vineyards just blow me away, and it's just so cool. But I promised I'd talk a little bit, before I dive into this wine even more, I promised I'd talk a little bit about biodynamic farming, because this is the birthplace of it. It was started by an Austrian philosopher named Rudolf Steiner, in the early 1920s. And it started out as this kind of kooky, weird farming technique, which some people might still consider it that. But today there's over 700 producers worldwide who are using this farming technique. So it is, whether or not you truly believe in it, it is used all over the world, including here in San Ynez, where Aaron and I are living. Or we live in Santa Barbara, but San Ynez is our wine growing region up north, just a little bit from us. But biodynamic farming is essentially like a step past organic farming with some holistic elements to it. So if you've heard of it before, but you haven't done much research yourself, you've probably seen that they use these cow horns with manure, and it's very by the moon and the sun, and maybe you don't know much past that. But one of the things that I really appreciate about it is that it really turns the whole vineyard or farm, because you can do biodynamic farming outside of a vineyard in a regular agricultural farm with whatever you're growing. But it really takes into the fact that the land that you're growing your food on is an entire microorganism itself, which it is. The soil feeds the plants, which then feed the animals that feed off of them, and then oxygen is released from those plants, and precipitation, and then it all kind of comes back down into the soil. And it really truly is, a farm is a breathing, living organism. So without getting into the whole more holistic element, because that's what's talked about most, I find it really helpful to talk about how special these biodynamic farmers think their land is. And that's the best part for me, because I was an environmental studies major, and I'm all about giving back to the environment and treating it the way it deserves. And that's what I think is the most special thing about biodynamic farming. Now, biodynamic winemaking is different. So if you see that on a wine that says this wine is biodynamically farmed, that doesn't necessarily mean that oh, yay, Leslie, I love it. I thought you were, so I'm reading the chat. Leslie also was an environmental studies major. I thought you were geology, because you asked about
I was environmental studies. Yeah, well, I mean, it's sort of related because of all the geology requirements. But so I was environmental studies undergrad, but I got my master's in landscape architecture.
Awesome. I have some rock type information for you later as well. But I lost my track of thinking. So biodynamic farming, and same with organic farming, doesn't necessarily mean that the wine is produced biodynamically or organically. So I won't get into all the details because I could lead an entire seminar on its own about farming techniques. But it is important to always talk to the producer if you have that ability, or do a little bit of research, because sometimes what is on the label isn't necessary. It can be a little misleading.
And to that point, Gina, I think when you get to know the small winemakers or read their stories, if they follow a sustainable model, whether or not they have certification, they usually follow that through from vineyard to winery. And so it is really important to ask beyond what the label says.
Absolutely. Yeah. And actually what a really interesting point that I didn't even notice until working for Solminer, who's also the Austrian local producer here. They are one of the very few, I think there's two that I know of, at least in San Ynez, I'm sure there's more up north, biodynamic farmers. And they, so they're fully certified through the, oh my gosh, I'm totally spacing. It's the biodynamic certification program. And they brought up the point that I didn't even realize that there's no ingredient list on a bottle of wine. So how can you really truly know what it is that you're drinking? And everyone assumes that it's just grapes and that's it. And it just turns into alcohol. And it really is, there can be at least, I think, up to 300 additions into normal winemaking. And I'm air quoting here because that's conventional is another word. If you think about like organic and conventional farming in terms of like bananas or apples, so non-biodynamic farming would be considered conventional. So when you go into the actual biodynamic winemaking, that literally is no additions, with the exception of a very, very, very small amount of sulfur, which occurs naturally on the grapes itself. So if you are allergic to a bunch of stuff, if you really want to experience something that truly is just grapes, seeking out biodynamic wine would be a good option for you. Okay, so on to this specific Gruner. I hear people call it Gruner Veltliner. I have been taught to call it Gruner Veltliner, but I think either one is just okay. I intentionally put in, if you guys have the tech sheet in front of you that I emailed you, I intentionally put in the residual sugar and the acidity, which I don't normally do because when people think residual sugar, they think, oh, this wine is sweet. But I think that's one of the really cool things about Austrian and German wines, because they are very similar, is that while they can sometimes have a higher residual sugar, the intense acidity that comes from these fantastic growing regions really balances that out. So the residual sugar in this wine is 3.8 grams per liter. And I'm going to bring up my little chart here. And so you know what I'm talking about. When we talk about residual sugar or sugar that remains in wine after the grape juice has been turned into alcohol. Sorry, what?
After fermentation.
Thank you. Science. You can have a totally bone dry wine, which has literally no residual sugar. And you can also have a dry wine, which is probably what most wine is that you're tasting. And that goes up to 10 grams per liter. So this is 3.8 grams per liter. It's not even halfway to its official dry level. And so that just goes to show you that even if people say it's completely dry, there can be a little bit of sugar left in it, but that does not necessarily mean that you're going to taste a sweetness, especially if you have a really gorgeous high acid wine like this one is.
And let's just clarify for those brands out there that like to market themselves as zero sugar.
Yes.
There's no such thing as zero sugar in wine. You cannot ferment 100% of the sugar out of wine. There is a level, it's like 0.3 or 0.5 that's imperceptible to us. Every winery has at least that small teeny amount. So the brands out there that are claiming to be sugar-free are not doing anything different than any other winemaker is doing. They always have a little bit of imperceptible.
Yeah, and I'm throwing out a fake number here. This is not an actual fact, but I would probably go with 95% of the wines that you can purchase off of the shelves are within that bone dry to dry level. And then past that, there's off dry, which is 10 to 35 grams per liter of residual sugar. And then sweet goes up from 35 to 120 grams per liter. And then the very, very, very sweet, think port, ice wine, sauternes, that's 120 to 220 grams per liter of residual sugar. So just so you know, and then there's also different levels for sparkling wine as well, which I won't go into until we actually taste sparkling wine in one of these seminars, which I would love to do. Back to my tech sheet. So I intentionally brought that up to show you that while there is maybe just a tiny bit more residual sugar than you might find in your regular Californian or white wine from anywhere else, the acidity level is double that. So it's really nicely balanced. And so, Leslie, this is for you here. And I'm going to read off of this list because I am not a geologist, but I thought it was really important to expand just a little bit on what Allison was talking about, the different soil types that are in Comtal. And apologies for my poor pronunciation, but it's Kofler Gneiss. It's spelled Gfohler. I don't know how to do G and F together, but Kofler Gneiss, which is the bedrock. That's like essentially what makes up the mountain. And then Los, which is airborne dust that was blown into the Comtal during the Ice Age and condensed there into the fertile soil. And then a number of different clay soils, which are formed directly, and that's kind of the top soil, essentially. And then I also thought it was really interesting. They mentioned this a couple of times on the on Steinschaden's website, that this region, Comtal, is at the same latitude of Burgundy, France, which totally makes sense when you think about the cool air that produces this really fantastic high acid wine as well. And then if you look at that map that I provided as well, and Allison, if you don't mind clarifying, you were saying Lower Austria, but when I was looking at this website, it actually looks like Steinschaden is in what I would consider Upper Austria. Was I
The region is called Lower Austria. It's not Styria, and it's not Burgenland. So the region itself, the Niederrhof, whatever I said, is translated, or we non-Austrian speakers call it Lower Austria.
Okay.
As a region, I'm not specifically saying to where that is, because Burgenland is way off, literally on the border of Hungary, which I'm going to get into in a second. Yeah. So you've got Burgenland runs kind of along that side. So Lower Austria is just what it's called. It's more middle and higher into Austria.
Mike, I'm going to throw it over to you. What are you tasting?
I was going to say, what does it smell and taste like? That's what I'm wondering. But amazing information there. I've been learning so much on these tastings myself. It's been incredible. But this wine, I think we're having some familiarity with the two previous white wines we have, in that you will probably hear that word minerality pop up again when I start to talk about it. But on the nose, I wonder if anybody else is getting kind of lime peel or lime zest or white pepper. And white pepper would be sort of the classic thing, I think, that you think of when you think of Gruner Veltliner. I don't know if I've had a Gruner that didn't have that sort of white pepper sensibility to it. And it also does kind of smell like wet stone or something, if that makes sense. You kind of hear that a lot. It's maybe an overused term, but this definitely falls into that category of mineral driven on the nose. And on the palate, I think it's the same thing. Actually, Alice and I were talking about this earlier when we were tasting this before the tasting, and she was mentioning that on the palate, it's very mouth-watering. It doesn't come across as sweet. The residual sugar is hidden by the high acid, but then it's very mouth-watering on the finish, and that really is a component of the sugar that's making you want to keep diving in. And I'm having trouble not continuing to drink this wine. I'm wondering what everybody else is.
Mike, I was going to say, if everyone takes a sip, swallows it, and just waits a minute and notice, keep your mouth shut, and you start to notice you're like swishing around, you're still tasting it, and it's like bringing up more. I mean, that's the beauty of, that's that kind of minerality, acidity. When you have these, as Gina was saying, you have all these beautiful wines in Austria and Germany that have residual sugar, some with even more sugar, far more sugar than this does, like German Rieslings. But when you match it with this intense acidity, all you get is that mouth watering. And what does that say? For me, that says, give me another bite of food. Like, I want to keep going. Give me another sip. I mean, that's what these wines crave, is more.
I agree. Although this one, I would not have trouble drinking without food as well. But I mean, I agree with that. To me, it almost has that kind of savory food quality too, even though it is very fruit forward. I think when talking about residual sugar, as you were doing, Gina, something that I learned that I think makes a lot of sense is don't refer don't think of it as this wine is sweet or this wine isn't sweet. And especially with something like Riesling or Gruner, think of it as this wine is more fruit forward, or the fruit was picked riper or less ripe. And I think when you start to think of it that way, you kind of does a little trick in your head and you start to really like taste that and start to experience it on a different level rather than just, ooh, this wine's too sweet, or oh, this wine's not very sweet.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point, Mike. I think that when we talk about sweet wines, when we say sweet, we should really only be using that when we're talking about dessert wines, fortified wines, wines that are sweet, significantly
sweet, right?
Sweet wines. But I think what's also really cool is that I had mentioned before, like Gruner, a lot of the ones that I've had are very kind of acid driven and very linear. And I think that this one, while still very acid driven, is not as linear. It's a little more medium bodied. It's got a little more richness in the palate. It kind of coats the tongue a little longer, and, you know, just it lingers more in the palate. It has a longer finish.
I agree. It's not a round wine by any means, but it is more round than most Gruners are, because some are very linear and they taste like they're just almost cutting your tongue. That's how tight and sharp the acid is. And they're kind of, I mean, people are obsessed with white wine like that, love it. But if you're not used to it, it's kind of like, whoa, is something wrong with this wine? It's a little scary and off-putting at first. This wine, I think, is far more approachable than that.
Yeah, really nice mouthfeel. I really love that.
Yeah.
Could you talk about how this wine would age? Like, is it better to drink this when it's young, or, you know, how does the taste mature over time, or, you know, just whatever your thoughts are on that?
I think that wines like this, I think, can age when you have all that acidity. I think you'll see that in a year, in 2 years, in 3 years, 5 years. I think that when it comes to aging white wines, like aging champagne, most have the capability. I think you just have to be prepared for something very different than what the wine tastes like today.
Mm-hmm.
I think a wine like this, I'm going to envision it could pick up kind of the more stone fruit characteristics, a richer mid palate. I think the acidity would still be there. It might be a little less than what we have now, but I could see more of that kind of richer stone fruit qualities coming out. You could, I don't know, it could also pick up kind of like hazelnut, kind of nutty notes, not because of oak time, just white wines evolve. White wines are really cool when they age, but they're not necessarily like just they're not as red wines age, they tend to soften and round out more, and white wines tend to change in a way you might not have expected.
I can say, all right, so one thing I've had is a lot of aged wine, and some are wines that were meant to be aged, and it's terrific that they are, and others are just aged and then funky and weird, and I came across them and was like, we should drink this 20-year-old Gruner. And in my experience, Gruner, like people I think just in like media in general, growing up, we see this thing of like aged wine is better wine, but that's not really the case in most wines. I think it's just aged wine is different. Like she was saying, the wine moves into a different place than it was necessarily intended to be, or even if it was intended, it's just very different. Something like Chardonnay, I think, talked about this last time, ages really well and does something very different that a lot of people would say is better. It's marvelous. It does bring that toasted nut thing and just really a complexity as it, you know, slowly oxidizes in the bottle. It just becomes incredible. But something like Gruner, I've had really high quality like Prager Gruner in these bottles that were like amazing, that I've had fresh and young and been like blown away. Just, you know, outstanding wines with amazing acid and complexity, and it's beautiful and so easy to drink but so complex. And then we've had some that were 10 and 12 and 15 years on, and it was just kind of like, this is interesting and still a great wine, but funky and weird and like kind of disappointing in that respect. So like this is a sort of wine that I would just rather drink young and really enjoy, kind of, I think, as intended in this case. When you see the screw cap, that doesn't necessarily mean it can't age, but it kind of means like drink fresh, drink young. And the price point kind of says that too. So
if you
for this,
Google
yeah.
according to Decanter, a very well-made, powerful Veltliner can age for 40 years or more. Jancis Robinson said that she tasted a wine that proved that it's capable of making a full-bodied wines they can age. So again, to Mike's point, you know, you're buying a quality wine. This is a wine that, Gina, correct me, it's about $15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
15 to 19, depending on the retailer.
But again, let's not mistake that $15 Austrian wine is not a cheap wine. That's a good value wine. You're going to get a lot of really good value wines in the $20 and under price range. That's what Austria offers. That's why if you like this, go out and buy more and try more, because it's to the point that I would say, totally off topic, but if you love Pinot Noir and you know that Sonoma sells Pinots for $60 to $80, but if you try a Pinot from Santa Rita Hills, you can get them for $40 to $50. And why? Not because they're not as good as the ones in Sonoma. It's because the region cannot get $80 for them, which means that if you're a no, go buy those wines, because the value is amazing for what you're getting. The market bears what the market can bear. And with Austrian wines, this is the sweet spot of the price point, that kind of under $30. Doesn't mean the wine isn't high quality or ageable. It just means, wow, good deal for drinking.
One more thing about ageability, that Alto Adige that we had for the first tasting, that wine had some age on it. I think, was it 2014 or 2015? If I'm recalling correctly.
2015.
And that started to do, I think, what these sort of tier of wines when they're high quality does, which it had become different. It had become more mineral driven. I think this would become more mineral driven. The acid would kind of tone down a little more. And as Allison was pointing out, it would get more of that fuller, relatively fuller body stuff and become a Chardonnay, but it's still going to be relative to how it's drinking now. It actually has some age on it now, right? 17 or
2019.
Oh, 19. Never mind. I'm thinking of something else. Apologize.
And don't forget.
So I like this the way it is, but it won't hurt it to give it a few more years.
Yeah, and don't.
I don't know how much it will age under this though either. So depends, right?
Well,
some are.
First of all, don't forget the Encruzado we had last time with Portuguese wine is a wine that can age. But also, I will tell you, I'm not an expert on screw caps, but there's a winemaker in Sonoma, Kathleen Inman from Inman Family Wines, who years ago decided to make half her Pinot Noir and put it under cork and half her wine and put it under screw cap. And her finding was that the wines under screw cap age just as well with less risk of cork damage, cork taint. And so in her mind, less oxygen gets out of them, but fully ageable with a screw cap. So again, doesn't mean that your New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc should be aged for 20 years. Like I have a few that are past their prime in my fridge here, but screw cap is not necessarily an anti-aging mechanism.
So what about glass cap? Well, here we go.
Yeah.
Right? We
so
thought it was
ready
easy.
For red wine? So we're gonna move over. We're gonna kind of. Yeah, I agree with you. 2019 feels like a decade ago. We're going to move over to Burgenland, and Burgenland is the easternmost part of Austria. It's also the least populous area of Austria. And one part back in history, it was part of Hungary, part of the Kingdom of Hungary, and then it became part of Austria in 1921. And there's a lake called Neusiedler, Neusiedler, and it's Austria's largest lake, but it's actually interesting because it's shared between Burgenland and Hungary. And so this is a region that is influenced by that hot continental climate that I had spoken about. So you get the dry, warm air coming in from Hungary, and it meets the cold air coming in from the west. And then you also have cold air coming from the north, from the Alps that are just up above. And all of that cooling hitting the heat makes for a really long growing season. And long growing seasons mean helping to retain the acidity of wines and bringing out a freshness and a brightness. And so that's what Burgenland, you know, kind of does. So Burgenland was formed out of, it's near the Alps. God, the easiest word, and I can't remember that one.
I believe it's the Alps.
The Alps. They say that it was formed out of the Styrian and Pannonian basins and the Eastern Alps unit. And you have rocks, there were tectonic plates that were shifted. And so you get, again, a variety of different soils throughout the region. You get sandy gravels, you get sedimentary deposits. That's always because of the lake. So you get a lot of river sediment. You get silty and clay, you get limestone, you get schist. I mean, you get a whole variety of things. There are a total of 13,000 hectares planted, and there are 5 DAC regions. Again, DAC is the Austrian version of AOC, and DO, denomination of origin. Don't ask me to tell you what DAC is in Austrian, because that is not my
Do it, Allison. Do it.
So there are 5 controlled, DAC controlled appellations in Burgenland, but outside of the vineyards near the lake, they produce a botrytis wine, a botrytis white wine. And that is a very famous sweet wine, if we get into our sweet term. But other than that, botrytis, do you guys know what botrytis is, by the way?
You should talk about it, Allison.
Really quickly, even though we're not having one, when you want dessert, when you want sweet wines, there are a couple ways to make sweet wines. And one of them is botrytis. And botrytis is a noble rot. We have gray rot, which is when you get temperature changes and that you start to get a gray rot on grapes. You don't want that. That's bad for grapes. But in
mold.
Like mold, exactly. But there is a noble rot, the botrytis, that happens in really cold climates. Germany can get it, Canada gets it, Austria can get it. What happens is it gets really cold, it heats up, but not so much that a bad mold forms. As this mold forms, the temperature drops again. And this mold forms, and what it does is the grapes start to kind of shrivel up raisin on the vine with the mold under it. So when you press it, you get a lot of sugar, a lot of sweetness, and then they ferment it and they can't get all the sweetness out. And that's how Sauterne is typically, Sauterne is made. That's how ice wine, some of it's botrytis, some of it's just frozen from the cold. There are 2 styles. When you get into the rich wines, the sweet wines of like an Amarone, those they're dry, they're picking them ripe and then they're drying them on mats to make the raisins. There's no mold involved. So there are different ways to make sweet wines. Botrytis is not something, it's something Mother Nature gives you. It is not something you can predict. It is not something that you can guarantee every year. Some regions used to have it every year, then climate change happened. And now it is hard. Botrytis is aspirational in many places. So it takes the perfect growing conditions for this to happen. That's a combination of the warmer weather, the colder weather, and the, I can't even think of the word, like the, I'm blanking on a word. I can't think of it. Too many Austrian words in my head today. But other than this botrytis wine they make by the lake, frost. Frost was the word. You want frost. So other than the lake, Burgenland is really known for red grapes. And it is primarily a red wine producing region. They do make white wines, but it's also known for sort of the most opulent red wines. They make complex white wines. But when it comes to red wines, there are 14 grape varieties in Austria. And the most, who knows what the most planted grape variety in Austria is? Yes? No. Zweigelt is the most planted, the most popular Austrian wine grape. Right behind it is our little Blaufränkisch, which is, so again, I said to you at the beginning that red grapes make up about 1/3 of the planting of that. So it was like 63% planted to white grapes. So if you figure you have about, what is that, 37% planted to red grapes, 13.8% is planted to Zweigelt. And then 6.5% is planted to Blaufränkisch, which is about 3,000 hectares. And Blaufränkisch is a traditional Austrian variety. It's a cross between Blau Zimmertraube and Weiber Heinusch. 2 grapes we never have to pronounce again because we can say Blaufränkisch. It used to be planted, I mean, back in the day, it was planted throughout the Habsburg monarchy when it was part of Hungary. And it was really important in an area called Blaufränkisch land. So Blaufränkisch comes from Blaufränkisch land. The variety dates back to the 18th century. And another name that it goes by is called Lemberger, which is what they call it in Germany. So I think Blaufränkisch sounds a little better, but if you've ever had Lemberger, same grape, which comes from a town called Limburg. So, you know, they name them after the towns, as do the Italians and pretty much everyone else. So as we said, that Blaufränkisch comes from a cross of indigenous varieties. It is found specifically in northern, middle, and southern Burgenland. You can also find it in the eastern part of Lower Austria, the Niederösterreich. Österreich, sorry. Compared to Gruner Veltliner, this is a late ripening grape, and it is, it really is important where it's planted, because this is a grape that it needs, it can have color where the leaves change and the grapes don't fully convert, but when the leaves change color, if the weather is too cool, so you want a little more warmth. Again, not too hot of a region, but it tends to be a late ripening variety, and it tends to have a lot of berry and cherry tones and a lot of acidity. It can yield wines that are dense, but also have a lot of tannins. And it's a wine that can be drinkable in its youth, but to the point of aging, it can develop a lot of really cool facets and factors as it ages. So kind of like the bigger, stronger version you have as a young one, the better aging potential as an older one. So that's kind of the overview of Blaufränkisch and Burgenland. Gina.
Well done, Allison. Yeah, that's a really, really great intro to Blaufränkisch. And just in terms of pronunciation, I'd like to say it is, and Allison is saying it 100% correctly, it is, but I do hear a lot of people say Blaufränkisch. It is not Blaufränkisch, even though you think that's how it's supposed to sound. It is actually Blaufränkisch. And that is because of the umlaut, which is the 2 little dots above the A in the spelling of Blaufränkisch. So now you can sound like an Austrian wine professional when you're asking for another one of these in your local wine shop. Just that small note on the residual sugar, it's 1.3 grams per liter, which is way lower than the white wine that we just had. But the acidity is also just a little bit lower. And that pretty much goes par for the course in terms of a white wine versus a red wine. You're going to have a little bit lower of an acid content in a red wine. And that's just kind of, it assists to the different flavors that you receive in a white wine versus a red wine. Also, the Blaufränkisch was fermented and aged in mostly, and by mostly I mean 90%, steel tanks, and then finished in 10% wooden barrels. Their website didn't give a specific whether it was new or neutral, but I would assume it's 10% neutral French oak barrels. And I really like that with a white wine. It really allows you to experience the grape more so than the oakiness of the vessel that it's been aged in. So you can really get a true experience of what this red wine tastes like compared to other red wines. And then just a fun note on Blaufränkisch, it is the parent grape of both Gamay and Zweigelt. Allison talked a little bit about Zweigelt, but Gamay, if anyone is a French Beaujolais enthusiast, yesterday was Beaujolais Day. And Ryan and Melanie, we did a private.
Actually, it was Beaujolais Nouveau Day.
Yes, correct. Absolutely correct. Thank you, Allison. And Allison did a beautiful blog post on that, right? It was a blog post?
We did a crush on this video about Beaujolais, not Beaujolais Nouveau.
Okay. Well, anyways, we can talk about that in our French. I'm sure.
So can I just step in?
Go ahead, Mike.
Let me, I think we should do a 11 or 12 part series on all the Cru Beaujolais one by one and just go through them, because Beaujolais, this wine, if I can jump in, that Gamay and Zweigelt parent thing is very important, I think, because this has a lot of resonance with Beaujolais fans, I think. This Cru Beaujolais, not Beaujolais Nouveau, but the Cru Beaujolais thing is coming through, kind of has that gaminess that you'll get in Gamay, which is beautiful, sort of a foresty sort of sensibility. And on this, I'm getting kind of a chocolate sort of mocha thing coming through on the nose as well. I'm wondering if anybody else is kind of coming across that, along with the black cherry as well, which would speak of Burgundy as well.
Absolutely. I think the like gaminess and chocolatiness that you're getting really helps denote the difference between this and like a really fruit forward, fruity red wine. And I think it's really nicely balanced.
Yeah, I mean, it's got the fruit notes, but it's not a fruity wine. And that's what's really nice. And I also get sort of violets, like a floral note to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty complex wine.
We're getting like blueberries.
And like fig? I don't know if fig is what I'm trying to pick up, but there's something like, yeah.
But I feel like this is a much less funky, Gina, this is a much less funky
Blaufränkisch
than like Soul Miners. Like Soul Miners is much fruitier and like acidic.
Well,
absolutely.
First of all, you have to remember that Blaufränkisch from Soul Miner is from the San Ynez Valley, and this is Blaufränkisch from a different country, so the terroir is completely different. So a grape will reflect where it's from. If it's made properly, it reflects where it's from, not what the winemaker wants to be, as we said. But I think that's kind of what the cool thing is like finding, here's the thing, when you get these notes, like, again, there are a continuum when you think about wines. If you think about classic grapes, let's say a Sauvignon Blanc, it's going to have everything from citrus notes to tropical fruit and kind of run along that continuum and have things in there. But what stands out to one person or another, depends on sort of our backgrounds, right? Like if you cook a lot, spices are going to be a really big part of your vocabulary, more so than somebody who doesn't cook. And if you're living in California eating, you might have a different sort of aroma base than someone who isn't exposed to all the fruit. So, all those things play in. So Mike and I were talking earlier because we were filming some videos, and of course he said, if he smelled red cherry or if he smelled black fruit out of this white wine, he'd be completely wrong. But if you pull back, like if you're getting, Ryan, if you're getting a little bit of fig, if you're getting a little toasted marshmallow, these things, I mean, it's something that we discuss to kind of see what those smells are, because fig to one person could be
chocolate to another, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's very subjective. It has to do with our sense memory of what we remember. Like we were talking about graphite before and pencil lead, and it's like if you grew up as a kid, our kids are not going to know what they're like. A pencil, what's that? It's like to us, it's like no problem, but they're just always been on their iPad learning, so it's like they're like have no idea what that smells like,
And so it's
Pencil, Mike.
fun to kind of play up with things and then delve into like what you're saying. And there's really, as long as you're kind of within the parameters of a grape, there's no wrong answer. So it's really fun to hear like toasted mellow and fig and coffee and chocolate. The fruit notes are so great. And what I love about a wine like this, and Mike, maybe you can talk a little more, is not so much what it smells like, but how it feels on my mouth. Like that, to me, so much about wine is how it feels on the palate.
Mm.
And, you know, I love sort of this kind of, it's not opulent. It's got nice kind of smooth tannins. It's got a little juiciness on the back palate, nice acidity. It's kind of medium bodied. I don't know.
Yeah, it's almost a little rustic. I mean, I think in California we drink a lot of wines that are kind of, you know, buried in French oak, and they're just very, you know, refined, and even like some really like fine like biodynamic wines can be really like finessed and like gently, you know, this one gently, you know, they'll approach this as sort of a gentle like experience on our palate. This is a little more rustic and a little more like down to earth. I think it's kind of got an earthy quality to it. I think that's what reminded me of Beaujolais, was just kind of, it tastes like funky fermented grapes. You know, it's not overly funky, but it's just kind of interesting, you know, kind of has a kind of a freshness in that direction.
This is a
Kind of that
really
gaminess.
good pairing for Thanksgiving. I know you're all drinking your wine right
Yes.
now. And sadly, I actually reached out to Brian, who is the importer for Winemonger, who supplied this wine for us for this tasting. And he had a bunch, and then someone, I don't know who, bought their entire stock that they had. But that's not to say it's completely out. He will be getting more in December, but I was so bummed because I was really hoping to be able to say, hey, this is, I mean, if you have time and you're in California, I could ship this wine to you for Thanksgiving, because this would be a fantastic Thanksgiving pairing. But that's okay. You've tasted it. We'll have more if you'd like more in December. But it's, I mean, if you can get your hands on any other Blaufränkisch, and you should be able to find it, especially if you seek out like a small, like boutique wine shop. Blaufränkisch is not impossible to find.
No. And like I said at the beginning, I know we're not necessarily ordering from restaurants, but if you're in an area where restaurants are selling their inventory, as a lot of restaurants have been doing, it's not uncommon to find some good Austrian wine in their inventory, because every good sommelier had Austrian wine on their wine list. Yeah. Because it's just such a food-friendly wine country. Again, it's like an old world with modern winemaking technique. It's not as rustic as France and Italy and Spain can be. It's more, you know, they're Austrians. They're like Germans. They're very rigid and cold. You know?
Allison, you're in LA, right?
Yeah.
So vintage, do you know Vintage Wine and Eats and
in Studio City?
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's some Rebecca.
Yep, I know her.
Yes. So Rebecca always has, Rebecca always has some Austrian wine. She carried Soul Miner for a while, which is why we went to the wine bar and then got to know her and love her wine. So if you're in LA, there's always she always has a few Austrian labels, and her and Gina have basically the same taste in wine. So if you like the wine that Gina picks out, she has
and there's a new wine bar that just opened in West Hollywood that my friend Rick opened. He had been the sommelier at Auburn, which unfortunately closed. But he opened up a wine bar in West Hollywood that is focused on, dare I say it, my least favorite word to describe the wines, but natural wines. But
like, or you
I'm a
intervention.
big fan of minimal intervention. I'm a big fan of organic and sustainable
intervention wine.
I am a big fan of letting the wine speak for itself. I'm not a fan of the word natural, but I would rather use natural of the word clean, and so I will suck down the word natural as long as you don't say clean wine.
Don't say what? Clean?
Clean wine.
Is that a new thing they're going to?
Oh man.
What rock have you been living under?
You tell me. You don't.
Cameron Diaz came out with a wine called Clean that she calls Clean Wine, and it was all the rage of or all the ire of.
I don't even know. I don't even know who that is.
Yes, you do. For anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, clean wine is basically just another form of, really sorry to say it, but bullshit marketing that a lot of people fall for. And this is why we talk about, you know, what's actually in the wine, what certifications are, how are your farming practices, because you can say natural wine in the same way that Fruit Loops can claim that they're naturally flavored. It doesn't mean anything. There's no certification. There is there's no one single organization or person saying, okay, well, what does natural wine mean? And that goes.
But if you say biodynamic, though, that is, you do not just say that. You cannot just say that. That's very, very difficult to get biodynamic.
Biodynamic is a certification, but you will meet winemakers along the way who say they follow biodynamic practices without the certification.
Yeah. And that's
because it costs money, and organic and sustainable. That's what I look for. I think, and I look for boutique and care like the wines that we've been bringing you. I think that, I mean, I had my 2 cents to say, because a lot of people wrote about Aveline, the Cameron Diaz clean wine. You can look on my blog at Please the Palate. I wrote a story, which I repost all my stories on my blog in case people can't read the Napa Valley Register stories. But it was called, Is Clean Wine the New Hydroxychloroquine? So now you know how exactly I feel about that.
Well said, well said.
I mean, you know, the thing with wine, and I mean, we're kind of preaching to the choir because we have a group here who has spent 3 weeks with us now, tasting interesting wines from different regions, and knowing that most of you taste wine separate from these 3 tastings and explore the wine world. But it's hard. Somebody posted on a Facebook group today, in a wine group, and they said, I only drink French, Italian, and Napa wine. Am I missing out on anything else? I'm really happy. And a lot of people said, yeah, you're missing out on a lot, or you should try this. And my only comment to him was, you can never, here's my one absolute, you can never have absolutes in wine. The words always and never don't work in wine. They don't. Because anything you say, you can be contradicted easily. I never drink white wine. I will find a white wine that you will love. I always drink, you know, California wine. And guess what? Someday you're going to have a surprise Oregon wine in there.
Or I don't like sweet wine.
Yeah.
I don't drink sweet wine. I hate sweet
that's
wine.
not a sweet wine. That has residual sugar, but it's
I
not
know, but if somebody, well, that's exactly what you're going to say, is you're pouring them like an amazing Riesling that, you know, it's like, no, you just have to get over that hump and recognize. Yeah, so I mean, I think that it's great when you do this, and you can, any opportunities you have to taste more wines and boutique wines and get to know the stories of the winemakers or of the regions and the grapes and understand what they're doing, you've got 10 feet ahead of the average person. I mean, it's not even, you know, like there's no competition, because you know, you're already past the point of having to listen to some marketing speak about clean, natural wine, and we don't add anything. Like, just ask the winemakers. They tell you what they're adding. And by the way, all those additives, even if you don't want them, they're natural. They're naturally based. You may not want them in your wine, but they're not. But you know, you just did include, don't say all of those
the wines that the wines that are qualified and allowed by the rules of the standards of California winemaking practices.
But I know some winemakers don't always follow the rules. So I've heard.
Of the ones we know, they are all naturally derived.
Sure.
Again,
they should be.
Oak chips are naturally derived. It doesn't mean you want your wine aged with oak chips floating in it, but oak chips are not manufactured. They are.
Randall Graham has made wine with oak chip in it. I'm pretty into what he's doing, so I don't know.
No, but that's what I'm saying. It's all naturally based.
Let's bring it all home. I love these
What happens
sidebars.
when you drink and talk? No, I'm kidding.
Well, it's 8:15. We're here till you guys stop asking us questions, but I just figured I think it's probably an appropriate time to open up the floor to all of you guys. Do you have questions? Do you have comments? Do you like the wine? Do you hate the wine? Which is always okay because it's a wine tasting. For those of you who haven't had Gruner or Blaufränkisch, are you excited about this new grape now? Comments, please interrupt us.
Yeah, both grapes were great, and I think we might have missed it, but in California, what wineries are offering these varietals? Because I know they're not very common, obviously, out here.
Well,
Yeah.
Gruner, surprisingly, you will find more and more winemakers throughout California and even Oregon making Gruner. It is, I mean, he works for Soul Miner, where his wife Anna, but you have Fiddlehead does a Gruner.
Fiddlesticks.
Fiddlehead does one. They grow it in fiddlesticks. I have hiding back here. There are so many Gruners coming out of
Story of Soil, Spear.
Oh, I know Story of Soil.
Yeah, so lots of Gruner in California. Small amounts, very, very small amounts, but you can find it.
Kenneth Volk and Santa Maria makes Blaufränkisch.
Yep. Wild.
Who is that?
Kenneth Volk in Santa Maria has made a Blaufränkisch. I'm trying to make sure I pronounce it right.
Thank you.
Which is delicious.
Awesome.
The story of
Thank you.
soil. Somebody mentioned the story of soil Gruner Veltliner.
Yep.
It's absolutely incredible. One of the most
Amazing.
interesting white wines I've had this year. Incredible.
Yeah. I have an interesting note on Kenneth Volk. So before I experienced Soul Miner's Blaufränkisch, the only other Blaufränkisch that I had ever seen was given to Aaron and I by one of his old coworkers, because he knew that we liked wine, and he received this weird wine that he's like, I don't know what to do with. I don't want to taste it. I don't know if it's good. And so he gave it to us. But it was a Wild Horse. If any of you know, it's a massive, massive wine company. They were one of the first people to actually be growing Blaufränkisch on their vineyard. And so that was gifted to us. And I was like, that's cool. What a weird wine variety. And the reason why Kenneth Volk, who now has his own winery and has had for a long time,
Right.
he started producing, he helped plant that. And
Oh, cool.
so it started there when he was one of the vintners there, and then he came off and still continued to make Blaufränkisch. And so for a very, very, very long time, up until extremely recently, Kenneth Volk and Wild Horse were some of the only other producers in California to be growing Blaufränkisch. So I'm glad you picked up on Kenneth Volk.
Yeah, and his wines are terrific. If you get a chance to go visit the winery there one of these days, hopefully soon. But he's fantastic. I think he's looking at trying to retire soon, but he was the head winemaker at Zacca Mesa for a while as well. But he's very good.
Yeah, and then like Allison and Mike were saying, Gruner's a lot easier to find, just because it's one of those white varieties that is very happy here in California with our cool ocean breeze. But please, if anyone finds any other Blaufränkisch other than Kenneth Volk, Wild Horse, and Soul Miner, please tell me, because I think those are the only three. And I don't want to say, like Allison that said, there's no absolutes, but to my knowledge, those are the three.
No, I don't know many others beyond that at all. It's not an absolute. An absolute would say there's none in California.
Yeah.
Sure, three. But yeah, I'm trying to think. I feel like I had one. I'm trying to think if I had one in Oregon or
That's possible.
I have to do some research to where I've had Blaufränkisch domestic.
I would say just go buy the Austrian Blaufränkisch that you can find, because it's going to be half the price, and it's going to taste from the region that it came from instead of California. Well, I mean, I love California wine, but I don't know. I think it's going to be more interesting if you just go buy the real thing.
Well, it gives context. That's the point of all of these European tastings that we're doing, is it gives context to any kind of a similar variety that you find here in California. And I think that's probably one of the best learning experiences is, you're not going to truly understand a California Pinot Grigio until you taste an Italian Pinot Grigio. And why a Californian Blaufränkisch might taste different than an Austrian Blaufränkisch. And so you can understand kind of the backbone of it, but then you really get into, like we've gotten into, the climate, the whole terroir, and the farming practices, and then the winemaking. So one variety can have a completely different experience than the next in different areas. Go ahead, David.
Oh, thank you.
I saw you.
So I might have passed out, but did we talk about the winery that produced the Blaufränkisch?
No, so we got passed over. So I'll give my spiel. Thank you for bringing that up. And I got sensitive of the timing of everything, and I didn't want to hold you all here. But the 2018 Xantho Blaufränkisch, owned by it's a collaboration between two gentlemen named Joseph Umatham and Wolfgang Peck, who in my creative mind I like to think is like the ugly stepbrother of Wolfgang Puck. Bad joke.
Or the better looking one.
Ooh, yes, maybe. Actually, yeah, he is very handsome.
You know where else.
But so just very briefly, Xantho, if you all noticed, which I'm sure you did, the lizard on the label, I thought was really special. Normally, you see on a lot of the Austrian labels that I've seen, they feature different animals, which is cute. There's a lot of different labels that have that, but I feel like in Austria, it's very intentional, and more so than just, we thought this animal had something to do with the wine. But going back to the biodynamic farming, is everything that they do there is helps the environment that the grapes are grown in. And so they specifically chose the Pannonian forest lizard, which is that lizard that's on the label. And that lizard exists very happily in the growing region. So they see a lot of those lizards in the vineyard. So I thought that was a really special note to this wine specifically. And then another interesting note is the soil conditions in the vineyard is very similar to Grave in Bordeaux, France. And so that very gravelly, very sandy soil that has huge rocks in it. So it's actually really hard to kind of like dig into the sand, because you'll pick up these huge rocks. And those rocks are really important to maintaining a consistent heat level in the soil as well. It kind of acts as a refrigerator on the cooler days to maintain a coolness, and then when it's hot, it picks up the heat from the sun and acts as like, not an oven because that's too hot, but it maintains a very consistent temperature, and that is makes for a very happy vine, at least in the soil. And then it can experience those diurnal shifts that happen when it goes from daytime to nighttime. So yeah, thank you, David. Those are our notes on that specific vineyard and region itself.
Tina, can I hop in? Just when you guys were talking about American Blaufränkisch, we definitely had one through Verve Wine Shop. It's a San Francisco and New York City wine shop. That was from upstate New York, because upstate New York does the Finger Lakes. I went to Syracuse.
That would be, that was Nancy Ireland, who has not red bush, but red, it's a bird. It's a winemaker. I know who the winemaker is who does Blaufränkisch. It's fantastic. She does a lot of Austrian, German, and Northern Italian variety.
Yeah, and because it grows up there, I think like the climate I think because they do a lot of Riesling. I mean, they do sweet Riesling up there, but they're getting better about doing some dry Rieslings as well.
Yeah, no, they make a range of Rieslings. Again, remember, just because it's sweet doesn't mean it's good. If you have the acidity to balance it, I can give you like a Trockenbeeren Auslesen that is one of the highest sugar levels, and you will die. It's so good. It's so good. But no, I know who it is. It's Nancy Ireland. She went to UC Davis and had worked in California and established a vineyard in Finger Lakes. And she does Blaufränkisch, and she does a Veneto red grape that I'm blanking on, but she does Terral de Go. We got a Terral de Go in our weird wines.
Red tail.
Red tail. That's it. See, it was a bird. It's named after a bird.
Leslie and Brian and I needed you when we were in college in Syracuse. And I never went wine tasting in the Finger Lakes. I was in Syracuse.
I did.
Melanie?
Kathy, you have a question?
Yes, I just want to tell Melanie my daughter's gone right now, but she went to Syracuse too, even though she's a native Californian.
Oh, wait. What did she study? What school was she?
She was in PR.
So she was in Newhouse. I was in
Newhouse. That's right. It's been like 10 years, so.
Wait, what's your daughter's name? It's been like 11 years.
Carlotta.
Oh, that's so funny. That's like when we were there. Yeah. It's been
really?
Well, 10 years ago, right? I graduated in 2009.
I think that's right. I'll have to find her and
anyway, sorry guys, but that's hilarious.
I do have a question though about the wines, back to the white wine. Gina, I was just wondering, is this one going to be available for purchase?
Yes. Yeah, I don't have any in stock right now, but I will get it. And so I'll put out an email to all of you guys. I'm more than happy to take pre-orders for the Blaufränkisch, but like I said, it won't be available until December, and I don't have a specific date. But if you wanted to call out how many you want, I'm happy to order. And then I will also order, put out an order for the Gruner as well. You'll receive an email.
It's my daughter, Melanie, Melanie went to Syracuse too.
So Brian did. I went to ESF. He's also a Newhouse grad.
Yeah, look at that, upstate New York. In 2010, I wasn't there. Oh, when were you there? Don't you remember?
I also wanted to say
she graduated in 2006. Sorry.
Oh.
What was that, Leslie?
Sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say that we knew Blaufränkisch just because there's this like one vineyard in Northern Virginia that we had been to where they do Blaufränkisch, and so I'd remembered the name, and I just looked at their website, and they also do a Gruner Veltliner. So it's called Odium Cellars, Otium. And actually, I mean, we're not like super huge fans of Virginia wines other than just for like, having a good time.
Oh, Kathy, before you go, sorry, not to interrupt that, Leslie, but
no, go ahead.
Gina, do you want to quickly mention what we're thinking?
Yeah, and Leslie, I want to get back to that because I'm super curious, but just before everyone goes, and please feel free to drop off after this, I'm going to tell you right now that we are so excited about the participation that we've received and so thankful that you guys have joined for all of these tastings, that we are planning another 3-part series focusing on 3 different countries. We are focusing on some New World wines starting January 15th, and the country order might change, but we are focusing on Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa wines on January 15th, January 29th, and February 12th. It's every 2 weeks, just kind of like exactly how we did this time. We figured we'd give everyone a break for the holidays.
And I have a question for everyone. Are you interested in what's weird in those places? Or is there something, or what's sort of the best representation of what those countries offer? Or what kind of what are you interested in when it comes to Australia, which you probably think you know more about, and
put it in the chat.
South Africa, which you probably don't know as much about. Yeah, just message us in chat, like kind of what sort of intrigues you, because for South Africa, I already have an idea, but I'm curious what direction you want to go in Australia.
Yeah.
Or is there another country we haven't mentioned, or something else topically that is super interesting to you that you're like, when are they
So what we thought is for the next 30 series that we would go to the Southern Hemisphere, doing Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, and maybe down the line we could do South America. We do Argentina, Chile, but we throw Mexico in there. Central America, you know, Americas, just to kind of do not that they're similar, but regional, continental shifts of the region. But if there's any country, specific region within a country you're interested to, weird grapes, traditional grapes, the focus will always be indigenous grapes, what's local to the area. Like, the goal is not to bring you Cabernet that has been planted around the world.
So I love the two comments that just came in right after the other, because Kathy says the more typical ones, we need the background first before the weird ones. Donnie agrees. And then Leslie says maybe the weird ones for each country. So I think it's probably, maybe we do one of each. Maybe we do the more typical, and then we do kind of a more strange one. I think that's probably a good call.
Well, off the cuff, I would guess, and we have a lot of talking to do, but when you think of New Zealand, you think of Pinot and Sauvignon Blanc. But we will show you, if we do Sauvignon Blanc, we will show you an atypical, or the more typical now, Sauvignon Blanc that is not what everyone started drinking New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc over, if that makes sense. Like, everyone went to that green grass, gooseberry, cat pea Sauvignon Blanc. That is not, there are so many better ones now. So if we did something like that, we would show you sort of the better, you know, the newer version of Sauvignon Blanc. And, you know, Pinot, maybe a region that you're not aware of, because maybe you know Marlborough, but you haven't thought of Central Otago or Martinborough or some other place. So with Australia, you know, Australia has cool climate areas, so you don't necessarily think of it, but they make great Pinot, but maybe you're also thinking Grenache and some white wine. And then South Africa will definitely have a Chenin Blanc. Just beware, because they make some of the best freaking Chenin Blanc.
I love Chenin.
But does everyone want to try a Pinotage, or do you want to avoid Pinotage?
No, I think Pinotage is really necessary. Remind me, Pinotage is a blend between what two grapes? Pinot Noir and what's the other one? This is from South Africa. We're doing a little preview for next time.
Hold on.
I'm guessing Cinsault?
Yes! Thank you, Ryan. A+.
Pinot, very good.
You are allowed to come to the next class.
Yeah, so I mean, there are a ton, and you know, again, email Gina what you're interested in, because we can go into France and go into the Rhone Valley, we can go into the Loire Valley, we can do a wine from each region, kind of like we did with Italy, where we went north and south. We can delve more into Italian wine, we can delve into Germany. You want to try some really good sweet Rieslings.
Jody says she would love to learn about various Beaujolais, like Mike suggested, as a 12-part series. If you guys are in for a 12-part series, so are we. I see a lot of head shaking. So maybe we start, we'll need to do a little bit more research for a larger part series like that, but we'll definitely head into some New World wines next. But we are here for you guys. As long as you're interested in hearing us talk, we are happy to be here.
Oh, one on aromas and flavors.
Love.
That means you just have to taste and taste and taste a lot of wine.
And then I got a private message from Ryan and Mel that said they would love Pinotage, and sorry, it's not private anymore, but they would love to taste Australian Riesling. That Australian or Austrian?
Australian Riesling. They make
Yes,
That's
Australian Riesling.
fires.
Yes, Clare Valley Riesling.
What if we do an Australian Riesling and Grenache?
Yes, yes, Australian Riesling, especially from Clare Valley, if we can get it. Oh my God, so good.
With the Grenache, yeah, that would be a
Oh
good.
yeah.
Okay. We
No,
will
you know,
put down the wines you want.
If you ever want to do something to build flavor, descriptors, and aromas, the best way to do, whether you do it in a group like this or you do it on your own, kind of thing, is to be able to get 4, 5, 6 wines from the same grape from different places, where you can really kind of go through and with guidance understand, like, this comes from sandy soils and this comes from clay, this is a hotter climate, a cooler climate, whatever those nuanced differences are, and really taste the differences. I mean, it helps if you have someone who understands the wines and can talk about it, but really to understand the nuance of, Pinot's a great example. Like, Pinot, people say they love it, they fall in love with it, but Pinot from Willamette Valley is different than Burgundy, it's different than Sonoma Coast, it's different than Santa Rita Hills, it's different. Pinot has again, that continuum it sits on, but it's the more you taste it that you start to actually taste and smell the mushroomy umami flavors of Oregon Pinot versus the kind of cherry cola of Santa Rita Hills versus the kind of cool climate earthy of Sonoma Coast. But you have to really kind of understand the grape and then taste them next to good examples from other regions. Like, it has to be very thoughtful how you pick them, because if you pick the outliers or the unique wines or the funky wines, you have to find very classic examples of a region to compare it to other regions.
David agrees.
Sorry. Unless you can just go wine tasting all the time and build it up over time.
Well, I like we keep saying, we're here till you guys stop asking questions, but I know that we keep saying these are an hour long, but I'm just so happy and honored and thankful that you guys hang around attentively for now almost an hour and 40 minutes. So I'll give a last call for any questions, and if you need to hop off, you may. And I will send an email out with these reminders. Can you guys hear me? I feel like I'm getting weird internet feedback. Yeah, okay. So I will send an email out. So we don't have any bundles to purchase yet. We will get to that late December or early January when we figure out exactly what wines we want to purchase. But in case you guys want like a save the date, I'll make sure to get an email out to you guys as well. And yeah, any last questions?
Deborah, did you raise your hand? Did I see her?
No, we have no life, and this is great that you guys entertain us every couple of weeks on a Friday, so really appreciate that.
David, I thought you were mad at me for planning it on a Friday.
It is during Shabbat services. Yes, I have a conflict, but
clearly you picked the right choice.
Well, the other's recorded, so I can watch that later.
We will also do Israeli wine eventually as well. There's a growing amount of kosher wine that I have been dying to do a class on. For all you Jews and non-Jews. I think it's another just what the hell is kosher? I think that's such an interesting thing to learn about. So looks like Allison has some.
And it's a very, very appropriate Jewish.
I have this.
I'm dying to try it.
Yeah.
Enigma. See, it's in Hebrew on the back.
Nice.
Oh, look.
I wrote a story about the father and son of Margalit, and I have yet to taste the wine. It needs to go into a refrigerator shelf, but it hasn't found its space yet, so it's on the back counter.
Yeah, that's not a very crowded back counter there, Allison.
You're not seeing the front of the table in front of me either.
Turn it around. Let us see. Share.
Let me see if I can do this without breaking anything.
She's got a mic and a ring light now too.
Oh wait, I have it all covered by
Lower it. There you go. Did you tuck them in for bedtime? Why are they covered?
No, what's been happening is the sunlight coming in is hitting the kitchen table, And so the wines that are on the table are from virtual tastings that I have to write about at some point and retaste. And they're getting too much sunlight in the morning. So instead of constantly rotating them around the table, I threw a towel over them the other day, just like I have on my wine rack over here. Because
Nice.
every time I take a picture, someone yells at me and says, you know, sunlight is not good for wine. And I'm like, I'm fully aware, but there's only so many wine refrigerators I can fit in this place.
One more final question that I got from Jody. She says, meant to ask about the wine cork or the glass stopper that we're experiencing. She said she's never seen that before. So that's just stylistic. It's very similar to screw cap. I think glass and screw caps, there's just no chance of any cork taint or TCA or bacteria getting into the wine. So there's constantly people coming up with different stoppers, and that's just another one. If anyone has problems with that, it's actually easiest to kind of like with your thumb push up on them instead of pulling up at the same time. Give it a little like at an angle, and that it helps open up that way.
And actually they're a good sealant because you know, it doesn't come out, so it doesn't, there's no like screw cap, like Gina was saying, that it you don't have the cork taint, but you also have a nice seal on it. It's not like as Mike was having a little problem earlier when he didn't have a champagne stopper for his bubbles.
Oh, poor Mike. Yeah, and nobody made fun of our wine opener tonight because we didn't have to use it.
I did buy a new one.
That's right. And you know, something to consider, you know, Mike and I both have it. I don't know if Gina has one, but
Coravin.
A Coravin, this is a great thing. And I know that I can get a discount. It's still an investment, but I can get a discount if you're interested. But this is a great thing to have if you want to taste, like if you want to go through and taste 6 wines and kind of compare, but you don't want to commit to opening all these wines. A Coravin is a great way to be able to taste a lot of wines at one sitting if you're not a party of 6.
I'm curious about that because we asked, we were thinking of buying a Coravin and we asked several.
Well, I can get you a discount. Don't buy what we sell.
We asked several people who worked at wineries and they said that if you were planning to keep, like they were saying they would never do that to a good bottle that you weren't going to then drink within a relatively short period of time, because they said they still felt like they noticed a difference when you eventually, like, so because we were talking about it as like, oh, like decide if a wine is ready and then maybe like not drink it for a year, like, and they really recommended against that.
So what I've heard
Can
from
I
people,
speak up? Let me say, I've been using the Coravin for like 5 years, maybe longer, maybe 6, 7 years. As long as they've had them, I've had it. And I will sort of agree with that. I think that I would not take a Harlan or something and, you know, oh, let's Coravin it and try it, you know, and then drink it in 4 years. Like there will probably be some noticeable deterioration. It'll probably still drink okay though. But I mean, all said, I've used it tons and tons and tons. And if you're using it correctly, it's really terrific for, you know, drinking from several different bottles over a period of a few weeks or something. But I mean, that's if you want to do that. You'd have to specifically like really want to do that. Like I want to sample all these different wines, or if you're trying to learn about wine, it's incredibly useful. Like if you're studying wine and want to be able to sample from 20 different bottles at different times over the next month and a half because you want to learn everything there is about, wines from Loire Valley or whatever, then it's so valuable in that respect.
But I also think that if you are drinking a wine, like, I mean, here's 2 examples, because they're white wines, you can see the fill lines. Mm-hmm. I've Coravin both of these. This wine, if I lie it on the side, the cork will not dry out, and I wouldn't hesitate to drink this wine in 6 months, a year, or a year and a half. This wine I've already gotten half through. Mm-hmm. I'm going to drink it in the next week or 2. I'm not saying it'll go bad, but I'm not going to keep it for a long time. But the benefit is that I've had this, you know, I had a glass on Saturday night, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. And I don't have to throw out the rest of it, because guess what? If I want a glass next week, I'll chill it down and it'll be fine. So
and the correct way, I'm going to interrupt you, Allison, the correct way to be storing a Coravin bottle is on its side, because the natural cork properties are when cork is moist, it expands, so that hole that you're essentially punching down into a cork will actually fill back up. You cannot use a plastic cork, you cannot use a recycled cork. So it is a specific kind of encloser.
It has to be a really high quality traditional cork, and there's so many hybrids out there is a problem I come across now. And sometimes I can't tell. Like I'll look at it, I'll think, oh, normal cork, this should go well, and then I'll put it in the cellar down like that, and then
we're like today when he didn't take the foil off and tried to Coravin this wine.
No, you were doing the same thing. Now, come on. Anyways, I think Coravin's amazing. So unless you really just like I have friends who they just open 2 bottles a night and drink through them, you know, the 2 of them, and that's just what they do. And to them, the thought of buying a Coravin's ridiculous. And I have other friends who are like, you know, like me, I'm drinking alone. I really should not be drinking a whole bottle of wine every time. So the Coravin's amazing when I just want to drink 2 glasses of wine. So
I mean, I think that's a good point. Like I live alone. If this I tasted something, but if I was 2 people and we were going to drink this much tonight, 2.5 glasses each, or a glass and a half each, I would open it, cork it, but no, I'd have to drink it tomorrow.
Is that an Ampelos wine?
Huh?
Is that Ampelos?
No, this is Field Blends from Paso.
Oh, Field Recordings. Yes.
This is a Gruner Veltliner.
I love that one. It's so good. Okay, full on tangent here, you guys, but Field Recordings, I feature their wine so much in my other virtual wine tastings and my wine club. Field Recordings is awesome. Please seek them out. They're in Paso.
And you mentioned Ampelos. Ampelos is the other biodynamic winery in Santa Rita Hills that you were going to mention earlier. And
also Martian. Martian is biodynamic.
Oh, okay, so there's more. There's a few of them. Yeah,
I don't know if
Ampelos
Martian is certified though, but they're definitely farming.
Ampelos is certified, right?
Yeah.
They're phenomenal.
Ampelos is certified. Martian is certified organic, but they are farming biodynamically, but they're not certified.
Yeah, but I mean, it's one of those things that if you know, at home want to get 2 glasses and you're pouring, you know, like maybe this much each, and you want to have a white and a red, you know, it's worth investing in. You want to taste, and then you want to taste a couple of others. But if you're really pouring like full glasses, don't waste the money, because the cartridges end up adding a lot of money. But,
and it should be noted that with the Coravin, the air canisters cost a fair amount of money too. So it is an investment. But if you really specifically want to be, you know, having, you know, a little bit from each bottle at a time, it's incredible.
Yeah. And clearly, like, that's my issue, is that I'm tasting and then passing on. So I fought it. I thought it was ridiculous when I saw a Coravin commercial for consumers. I thought that was the dumbest thing I could imagine. When I was watching them fill up a half a glass, and I was like, how much are people paying on cartridges? That's ridiculous. But I get it now. And I think that Shelter in Place has opened up a world to me that I also find that even if I have 2 glasses tonight, like this wine, I have not touched it since earlier in the week, and I don't know the next time I will. So I love that I don't have to throw this down the drain. I love that I can revisit this in a week, because I enjoyed the wine, and it would have been lost if I had to open it on Saturday. I wouldn't have it today. So I know that I have to drink this in the next couple of weeks, but I don't feel pressure to drink it in 3 days. That's the key. So yeah, I have a discount code, Gina does, and if you're ever interested, let us know. Because it could be a fun thing down the road to even pick a grape like Gruner Veltliner and get you 3 examples, an Austrian and domestic, and kind of see what the grape does, if that ever interests you.
Thank you. That's super helpful, because we were like ready to buy one, and then he was like, I'm like, I don't know. We also are those people Mike described though, who just drink 2 bottles in a night. So
Aaron and I have a Coravin, and it's very rare that it gets used because of that.
Understood. Oh, did we lose you, Gina?
No.
Oh, there you are.
No, I'm
So
here.
we can just use your Coravin, Gina, when you don't need it, right?
You know, I'll ship it to you. I'll charge you a rental fee. It'll be great.
It's fun. If we do more tastings, if you ever do tastings where there are 4 or 5 wines in it, my suggestion is just open up 1 wine, 2 wines, enjoy it, and save the others for later.
Yeah.
You'll have the knowledge and you can just enjoy them in your time. The benefit to the Coravin is you can taste them in the tasting and then enjoy them later. And it doesn't have to be next week. It can be 6 months or a year or 2 years. You just aren't, I wouldn't use it for a wine you plan to age forever. But there's no lifespan. On this wine, I would drink it. If this wine has aging capabilities, I would enjoy it in a year or 2. So I think that I can't believe I ever would become a spokesperson for Coravin. I used to think it was the oddest thing, but it has been my savior in the last 8 months. Except for champagne.
Love.
That's the problem.
Or it's the answer.
Mike made me open a bottle of bubbles tonight that are sitting in my fridge, but I've got a screw cap and a glass top, so I don't know what to do.
Get out of here. Go drink that champagne. On that note, I think we should probably let everyone go. I'm so thankful, so happy that you all are just sticking around. I've been in tastings where people like peace out after the hour mark, and it makes me feel like this community that we're fostering is a real community, and we're so excited to launch our next series that we will. You will receive an email from me with those dates. And like we keep saying, send us recommendations. We are here for you guys. We want to serve you exactly what you want. That's a huge priority of ours. And I myself have learned a ton in these tastings. Allison said so same, and it's so cool. I'm so thankful. So you guys have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful weekend. Happy Thanksgiving, happy Hanukkah, happy Christmas, happy Kwanzaa, everything, whatever you celebrate. We are so excited to see you in January again. And we will bring you more very cool wine from all over the world.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. It's been awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Thank you for joining us.